2001, and we're live.
Thank you. So Senate Government Operations coming back from a little break, couple little breaks. And we now have a draft 1.5, I apologize, of JRH2. And it is on the committee page, it has been posted so anybody can follow along if they want. And so committee, I think that the thing we need to do is to start looking at it and see where we are, and hopefully pass it out today. Yes, Senator Rahm.
You want to do questions clause by clause, or?
Yes, I think so. I think that that's the best way to do it so that we can answer any questions we have, make any changes we need to, instead of jumping around and going back and forth. Is that okay with everybody?
Yeah,
If we do it that way?
I assume you'd do it that way.
Okay. So we didn't change the introduction or the at all.
Madam Chair, if I may offer, I would be happy to go clause by clause with you, tell you whether there's a change in a particular clause and what that change is, and then all of you in the committee can have your discussion on that clause.
That's perfect. Thank you.
And with that
Okay.
understanding, I'm ready to begin whenever you are.
We are ready.
Very good. Then for the record, my name is Michael Chernick, and I am one of the Legislative Council staff attorneys and the drafter of this resolution. And the title remains the same as Madam Chair indicated a moment ago. All the introductory language is the same as you saw yesterday. No change. The first new clause I did change last night, and I alerted the chair to my concern that I wasn't sure where the 1906 date came from. I know we had there were discussions in the House about 1906, and there was at one point a 1906 clause that was then deleted on the part of the members of the House General Committee. I went through my materials, through session law, through the various historical articles, through Nancy Gallagher's book, and I just wasn't finding a specific 1906 reference. So I thought saying early 1900s effectively does the same thing.
I think it's great.
Okay.
I think it's well written, I think.
And
Yep.
then we had the discussion last night and this morning regarding breed better men from the Scientific American articles, Senator Rahm. And to be I was chatting with one of the editors, to be a motto, it actually had, this was the association's motto per se, or the organization. And then I saw in the various emails that went back and forth this morning, a reminder, and it was sitting right in front of me, of Nancy Gallagher's book. And it just seemed to be a good match. Serves the same purpose.
Yeah,
Okay.
I would just say we should say Breeding Better Vermonters by Nancy Gallagher. I just feel like it's not really fair to leave her authorship out.
I'll do whatever you want. The reason I left it out was I wasn't sure you wanted the name of an individual within the resolution, within the whereas clauses, but that's your decision completely.
It's unusual to do that, but
To do
Whatever
which
you want,
one?
I'll do.
To have people's names, I think.
Yeah,
yeah.
however you want it.
Is it normal to just cite a book without the author?
I've gone both ways over the years. I just thought that the reason I did it the way I did is that the resolution well, there are a couple of other names concerning the governor and lieutenant governor, but since she's an author and not a historic figure, I wasn't sure what you wanted to do on that. If you want it in, I certainly can.
I don't have strong feelings either way.
I have kind of strong feelings that, her body of work came at a time when a lot of people weren't listening or paying attention to this part of our history. And she's one of the foremost experts and has, really had to pull a lot of things together, starting at a time when we were not ready to have this conversation. And I feel like if we're going to cite her book, she deserves to be named.
then let's do it.
I'm
Fine
fine with
with
that.
me.
Yeah.
Okay.
Go for
Yep.
it.
I have so noted in my, so noted. The next clause is basically, as you suggested yesterday, I took the quotes out. Again, I
Okay.
had a discussion with editing, and the editing was asking me, what are you quoting? And I thought about it, and we discussed these concepts in other clauses, but it's not a direct quote from anything. So I
Yep.
pulled the quotes. The
Fine.
next clause, yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
I think I'm gonna have a lot of little comments, but it's once you take that out, I feel like then the accuracy sort of falls to us to make sure we're accurately describing what the eugenics movement was, and it was elimination, maybe, and sterilization. It just, I mean, if you just read that clause alone, it would seem like we were having death squads or something. This was through the process of sterilizing people. So it just feels like elimination and sterilization would make sense.
Right.
You
Eliminating,
want to change it to sterilization?
Or what about elimination through sterilization?
That's fine.
because I think Keisha's right. Otherwise, it sounds like, you lined them up
Death
against.
squads.
That's
Well, we probably did that too.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
and we started doing this way before 1900. Just saying.
I don't think it was just through sterilization. I think that there were other methods of elimination here. I think that you could say elimination and sterilization, but not elimination through sterilization, because
Or how about elimination including sterilization?
yep,
Fine.
That's why you're
And
paid.
Ron, would that work for you?
That sounds good. That's why you're the professional here.
Michael.
Okay.
Going to the next, okay, so I have those two changes so far. And the first two clauses. The next clause is basically, as you gave it to me yesterday, except I corrected the names.
Oh, okay.
It's actually Governor Alan Fletcher. I went back and I had his veto message, and the Attorney General was Rufus E. Brown. I
Okay.
went through my materials. Those are the right names, because by that point, Governor Fletcher had succeeded Governor Weeks.
Okay. Perfect.
So that was an historic correction.
Are we
But I
all
like
okay
the
with
right
that?
names.
Sure.
Okay.
Okay.
The next clause, I made two changes from three changes. One minor and two maybe a little bit larger, as was suggested to me yesterday. I added the word nevertheless right at the beginning, because it seemed to connect better to say nevertheless after the bill had been vetoed, state agencies, institutions, etc. There was a better flow of continuity.
Yep.
So that's why I
I
did.
like that.
I capitalized the S on state because with our protocol, whenever we're dealing with the state of Vermont per se, we capitalize the S. And I also spoke of the vetoed legislation to be really clear about that.
Yep.
And
Okay,
otherwise,
so I was curious. So even though the governor vetoed it, we didn't override the veto. We didn't reintroduce it.
the
It just
Senate
started
did, the
happening.
House did not. And
Okay.
so we are, if both chambers don't override, there isn't an override. So that's
Okay.
what happened. It was still vetoed, and it's listed, it's officially, I can tell you that I had the veto message, and on the official list of vetoed legislation, and what it became that the Secretary of State maintains, it's listed as a legislation that the veto was upheld.
Okay.
I like the idea of following with after the veto. Nevertheless, they adopted policies and procedures to carry out the intent, even
Right.
though, yeah, I like that.
That's
That-
largely your phrase, Senator White. I just made those two minor changes. Well,
Yeah.
however minor you want to look at them. The next clause, the 1925 clause, is the same as you've seen before. There's no change there.
Michael,
Oh, go ahead.
I've got a spelling mistake, I think, on line 4. Isn't it zoology?
Yes.
That's how you spell it. It's a
It is.
weird,
That's spelled correctly. It's been through
Okay.
spell checker and it's been through one
Wow.
of our senior editors.
learned
Unless you
something
want to put
today.
another O in there for
one
zoo.
of the O's is invisible.
I have a, if you like, just to satisfy everyone's concerns, I have a dictionary right in front of me.
Oh, that's okay.
I
That's
believe you.
No.
I believe you.
I think it would be the same with biology. You have biology is, okay.
I have a sort of substantive thought about this section. I raised it early in our process, but Henry Perkins was the president of the American Eugenics Survey in 1927. He had influence nationally, and I just feel like it's important to note that because Vermont ended up being one of the intellectual powerhouses of this national eugenics movement that way.
Ooh, that makes it even more insidious.
I could add if you want, I could say University of Zoology professor and president of the,
You could say established the Eugenics Survey of Vermont and later became president of the American Eugenics Survey.
so what I could say then, give me just a half sec. In 1925, University of Vermont zoology professor Henry F. Perkins, who is established, okay, we'll leave that, established the eugenics survey. But why don't we say who? I think we need the word who to.
You could say who later became president of the American Eugenics Survey, then
And
is-
who
Yeah, I think
later
that's-
became president.
I think that's the way to
and then
do it.
go on.
Yeah, I think so. And who later became. So leave it just like that, but after Vermont, put who later became.
Okay, and I have plenty of documentation on that.
thank you.
You've got it, it's in there and I and I put a big asterisk in AES, so I know what that means. And I have my note here.
I
Fine.
hate to ask the obvious, but was it later or was it before? I
She
mean,
said 1927.
Well,
Oh,
why don't we just, if I may suggest, why don't we say, and who served as president of the American Eugenics Survey? How does that work?
Okay,
We'll avoid a question. Because obviously he wasn't president his whole career, but at some point, so that takes care of that. And I have that and can do that. Next clause. This is probably the most controversial of the entire resolution. So we'll go over this. These state-sanctioned policies primarily targeted individuals, families, and communities, so far the same, whose heritage was French Canadian, French Indian, or other mixed ethnic or racial composition. I used both of those terms. If you want me to take one out, I will. But for the moment, I put them in. And here comes the point where all of you will need to discuss. And persons whose extended families, successor generations now identify either as Abenaki or as members of other indigenous bands or tribes. The one comment I will make is that they can't be their direct descendants because if they were subject to sterilization, there weren't any descendants.
Mhm.
but they had they're, brothers and sisters, they're descendants of.
That's why I spoke of, well, it's a descendant is normally that direct line from parent to child to grandchild. And that's why I used extended family.
Perfect.
I have just a couple of small corrections, or I don't know, thoughts I would put out there.
yeah, go ahead.
One is, I would say whose heritage was documented as French Canadian, French Indian, or other mixed ethnic or racial composition. I feel like that articulates that was just how they were noted in the record, not that they had to be that composition, because they may not have been mixed ethnicity. That was just how they were documented if they didn't want to be more specific, or their indigenous heritage. And then the other thing I would just personally say, it's a small point, but successor generations now identify as Abenaki or as members. I don't know, either feels
Yeah.
weird to me there.
I
Yeah.
put that in this morning. It's as a connector. It was
Yeah.
done for transitional. I can take it out.
I would take it out.
If I may ask a question, Senator Rahm, I guess documented is preferable over the word characterized as.
Oh, I don't know. I
I
don't-
leave that to you. I just suggested.
Documented seems more historically accurate. They had roles and records, and that's what they wrote down. So characterized feels more like you're describing it to someone else, but documented feels like,
Fine,
Yeah.
fine.
Goes to
So in
some,
that clause, I've added the documented, whose heritage was documented, and then we've taken out the word item.
right.
The next following clauses, next 5 or 6 clauses anyway, are the same. You had eliminated one clause from the House version, but it was gone yesterday. And then page 3 is the same until you have that new clause at the very last whereas clause, the bottom of page 3. That was wording that's, Madam Chair, you suggested yesterday, and it's verbatim what you suggested. I didn't make any changes to it.
Okay.
The
Anybody,
eugenics
that's
movement,
lines 18 and 19 you're
Correct.
saying?
you suggested that language yesterday, and I just plugged it in. No changes, no comma, not an apostrophe, anything, what you suggested. On to page 4. I've now split this into 2, and as I wrote, Madam Chair, to you last evening, I made your additional whereas a resolve because it's an action statement and it made more sense as a resolve, but let's go over this again carefully. Resolved by the Senate and House of Representatives that the General Assembly sincerely apologizes and expresses sorrow and regret to all individual Vermonters and their families and descendants who were harmed as a result of state-sanctioned eugenics policies and practices. And that is the language that you had suggested yesterday, verbatim.
Well, I think that language I thought was in the House version. And that the
It's close.
second,
It's
the
close.
second one was what I suggested,
It's,
but maybe not.
no, actually, it is the same as the first. What you would be proposing is a different second,
Right.
not the ethnocide genocide clause, but that the General Assembly should continue to work to eradicate the lasting legacy of its prior actions by listening to and working with the affected individuals and communities. And I did make a change, and I want to explain why I did. You had should, you had will, and one General Assembly can't bind another General Assembly. So I made it should. This was actually quite an issue in House General earlier in the winter. Generically speaking, you really can't say will in a resolution that a future legislature will do.
Yeah.
But should, you certainly can say.
But Michael, that seems so contradictory. We create laws that we have to all abide by. Every future legislature has to abide by
That's in
them.
a statute, but that language effectively binds in a resolution, a legislature. You can't do that in a resolution.
could you say, I know this could be like not good for a resolve clause, but could you say strives to?
You could do that.
Or will strive. Yeah.
Or just take out the word should.
And just
The
And-
General Assembly continue to work.
Continues, you mean in the past tense, in the present tense.
in the-
Continues to work. Yeah,
Yeah.
I like that.
That answers the problem entirely.
and that makes it active.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it active. You're not committing a future legislature, and yet you're expressing the same idea.
Right.
All very doable.
So that does change. I don't know if anybody has comments about the second resolve that the House had, but it does eliminate the I think it's stronger about, and I hadn't thought of this before until, well, I mean, I should have thought of it before, but when Rich was talking to us and he said, when you're looking at policies and procedures and laws, you need to make sure you're listening to and working with the affected individuals and communities. And so I put that in there, and then that kind of removed this whole second part of that last resolve of the House, which talked about, my print is so little I can hardly read it, but
Do you want me to read it to you, Madam Chair? I
yeah.
certainly can. That the
It's very
general,
strong.
if you read the second resolve from the House,
sure, I'm happy to. I have it
Okay.
right here.
Thank
The
you.
General Assembly recognizes that further legislative action should be taken to address the continuing impact of state-sanctioned eugenics policies and related practices of disenfranchisement, ethnocide, and genocide.
I like ours way better.
But I also think this is a very strong ending too. I mean,
Ours.
could we have both?
That's what I was gonna say. I mean, why can't we have both?
Yeah.
That's your call.
I'm fine with that.
I would end with this last resolve clause of theirs because it really is so
Set aside
strong.
one. But leave in your second. I'm hearing.
So there'd be three.
Yeah,
three.
that's totally fine.
You
This
can
is
have
a
3
policy
resolves.
resolution. It's fine.
We could have 10 resolves if we really wanted to.
Yeah, in a policy resolution, sure.
So Michael, can I ask why it's drafted more like a bill than a resolution?
It is drafted as a resolution.
Oh.
One of the things, well, 2 things. Number one, I mentioned to the chair last night, because this started in the House, it remains in the House font and format. You have different, there are different formats for resolutions that start in the House and start in the Senate. But
Oh.
once a House resolution goes to the Senate, it keeps the House format. Similarly, when a Senate resolution goes over to the House, it keeps the Senate format.
Okay.
But it's drafted as a bill, as a resolution. You have an opening here because you're amending it. And actually, the lead-in language is a little bit different than for a bill. We've been working on that, and this is the language that we basically come up with in Leg Council for when we're amending a policy resolution.
But when it comes to us to be voted on by the Senate, it will look like this, but there'll be more cross-offs and
Yeah,
then our language underneath it.
correct.
Yeah.
Senator Colomar, it may look like a bill to you because it does have that introduction.
Yeah, that was just curiosity, nothing else.
No. Sure, that's the answer.
Okay, committee, where are we?
We're pretty good.
Yeah.
I think we're ready, almost ready to vote it out.
Madam Chair, may I read through what all your corrections are one more time so there's no misunderstanding?
Yep.
It would give me a greater sense of security.
Yep, sure.
Because they're not that long. Okay.
Yeah.
In the first whereas clause, after better Vermonters, I'm going to add in by Nancy L. Gallagher.
Yeah.
Reported, and then after elimination, including sterilization. Do you want me to say including through sterilization or including?
No,
Including
not through.
sterilization, okay. So we have that. Going on to page 2, the next thing that I have is after eugenics survey of Vermont and who served as president, or we left the who out, I think, in the end. No, and who, that's right. And who served as president of the American Eugenics Survey. Correct?
Yeah.
I'm asking folks to
Yes.
reconfirm for me.
Yep.
Okay. On the next clause, we're going to, whose heritage was documented as French Canadian, et cetera, et cetera.
I'm gonna make one more comment here that I kind of missed. It says to collect evidence of delinquency, dependency, and deficiency. But I think that we very clearly heard that in addition to the policies targeted at French, these groups of people, it also really targeted those who were poor, mentally ill, and disabled. And I know that we talk up here about the dependent, the defective, and the delinquent, but I would like a separate whereas before this one with the groups of people that just says, whereas it targeted the poor, mentally ill, and disabled, to be very, very specific that was, they weren't just kind of an afterthought. They really were targeted as well as these communities of people.
Absolutely.
Would you consider putting them all in? Do you want to keep that? In the next clause, you're saying primarily targeted. Would you consider putting that into that clause, or else?
No, I think it needs to be two separate, that because they targeted these groups of people, but then they specifically targeted families and communities of these groups of people. So in my mind, they're two separate thoughts.
Then
We want all the poor people gone, and we're just going to get rid of poor people and disabled people, but we are going to target these families and communities.
okay, I have two questions then.
Yep.
At first, what do you want me to say? The poor is one of them?
Yeah, and whereas these state sanctioned policies targeted the poor, mentally ill,
Oh, do you
and
want-
disabled.
Do you want both of them to say these state sanctioned policies targeted?
Yeah. I don't think there's any harm in repeating that, but if,
You might add an also in somewhere. Maybe in that second whereas.
Okay, let me get the first one done first.
Yep.
These state targeted. And then what are the groups that you want?
poor, mentally ill, and disabled,
Say people with disabilities.
people with
Yeah.
disabilities. Okay,
Do we want to say mentally ill or persons with mental and physical disabilities?
Susan's here in case she has some thoughts on that.
Oh,
oh,
yes.
Susan is here. Susan, what would you say?
She might have stepped
I'm
away.
sorry, I had to unmute. Thanks for the question. People generally like people first language. And so if you said people with physical and mental disabilities, I think that pretty much captures the developmentally disabled, psychiatric disabilities, and people with physical disabilities. But Senator Polina was right, catching the people first language. It's
How
definitely.
about
That's
people-
because he was the founder of our respectful language bill.
Yes.
How about persons? Since they're technically, how about persons with mental and physical disabilities?
I think that's fine too. Or Vermonters or residents or other possible terms. I
You
don't want
want to
to.
say Vermonters?
I don't care at all, as long as we have it in there. I don't care what the modifier is.
Vermonters with mental and physical disabilities.
Yeah, so we have the poor, and then
The poor, yeah,
Keisha.
poor and.
Yeah.
Senator Rahm, you have a,
So I'm really not trying to fatigue people here. But you can sterilize both men and women, and the largest group sterilized were women. So, I mean, first and foremost, eugenics targeted women. So it just feels like now they're kind of left out, even though about 2/3 to 70% of those targeted were women.
here's my feeling on that. I think that that women were not necessarily targeted. Who was targeted were poor people, people with physical and mental disabilities, and these groups of people. So
Yeah.
they were the ones that were targeted. The result was that there were many women who were sterilized, but they weren't
Yeah.
targeted. That was the way of getting at these other people that were trying to be eliminated. They didn't target women, because if we said they targeted women, that would also mean the women, as Judy pointed out, that lived on the hill. So women were not targeted.
Right. If you ever read some of the, like, NPR has done a lot of national pieces on eugenics. I don't know if people have heard those, and they often did target women, they were really kind of focused on women that they thought were troublemakers or were, talking back or sleeping around town. Like, they were really quite focused on women.
But
Those were the defectives.
Yeah, well, but also none of our witnesses have actually asked us to specifically call out women. I think we're calling out everybody who was affected. I mean, we have his, Judy, who's our grounded in this. No one's asked us to specifically call out women. Is there, it's everybody who was affected it's bad all the way around.
I don't know. I don't have a strong feeling about it, but I think that by saying women were targeted, that we're losing.
Men were targeted to,
I don't think we have to.
Communities were targeted, and
Right.
groups of people were targeted.
types of people were types.
Right. There are statistics out there. I don't know if I can't remember if it's specific to Vermont, about what proportion of people sterilized were women.
Of course, it's going to be more,
A separate
because
clause than targeting. But I don't know about, of course, like, I feel like it needs to be said, because men were sterilized. You can sterilize both types of people. Women were sterilized in much greater numbers.
I don't know how. Do you have a suggestion about how we would do that?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
could we go back
Okay.
to the first, second, third clause? This movement targeted for elimination targeted for elimination. Well, I think they're going to say elimination or sterilization, especially of women. How would that work?
I'm looking at language around the country, and it says these are the groups that were targeted, and it especially impacted women. A lot of them are saying women of color, but that was, we addressed that with the Indigenous piece here.
It's an idea for
So
you.
how about if you said this movement targeted for elimination, including through sterilization, thus dramatically impacting women? So it impacted the women. It didn't.
Right.
Impacted.
That's what they're all saying. That meant it had a disproportionate impact on women.
How?
Yeah.
That's something you carry differently when you were.
How would it be if I wrote it, including sterilization, that dramatically doesn't seem to be right, that primarily impacted women?
Okay.
Disproportionately or primarily.
Yeah, don't
Not
use the word
disproportionately. How's that?
disproportionately. I hate that word.
Okay, Jeanette hates. Madam Chair hates
No,
it.
we've just used it so much that I think it's lost any meaning.
Primarily impacted women.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it impacted all those people. Did it primarily, does
The data that I remember seeing from looking over all the documentation in terms of sterilizations, there were at least documented. I'm not saying this is what happened, but the documentation I saw seemed to indicate that there were far more female sterilizations than male sterilizations.
Oh, I'm sure.
Oh, it had to be. So okay,
Whatever you want.
great.
I'm fine with that,
Either one.
putting it there instead of a separate
That
whereas.
primarily impacted.
Okay,
With that being said, the second clause, and I've noted just for the record again, that you're eliminating the word either just before as Abenaki. But getting back up to the top of the clause, do you, since we now have this new, these state sanctioned policies targeted, that maybe you could say these policies also targeted, or
Yeah.
do,
I would say that instead of primarily, I would,
yeah, these say also targeted.
mhm,
But I'll leave the state sanctioned in as a point of emphasis.
mhm.
Okay.
What's the clause before that, Michael?
The new clause before that, Senator, which is only in my scribble for the moment, these state sanctioned policies targeted the poor and Vermonters with mental and physical disabilities.
Perfect, thank you.
So I was taking the primarily out of the second because I didn't think you wanted to weigh one higher than the other.
Putting also in, yep. Good.
Okay.
And the only other change, well, two other changes that you were asked for, in the original second resolve clause, I'm taking out the word should, and I'm making the word continues in the plural to bring it into the present tense.
Mhm.
And then finally, I'm adding verbatim the original final House resolve, the one that has genocide and ethnocide in it.
I'm fine with that. So, committee and Michael, here's the question. Do we want to give some time here for a final version to be put before us and then we can vote on it?
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Given, yeah, Madam Chair, if I may, given that this is a policy resolution of extraordinary sensitivity and importance, I would feel much better that the elected legislators saw the absolutely final version versus a legislative attorney saw the final version before it goes into before it's introduced. Goes to the calendar rather.
Sounds perfect. So how much time should we allow here?
Given the pressure that our stretched staff is on in terms of editing, it would really be helpful if I could have the night.
Oh, sure.
Okay,
And then
We
we
can-
can post it tomorrow. Vote it tomorrow.
yeah, I was,
And because part of the issue, Senator White, is
Yeah.
that there are a couple of instances where I have new statements of fact that I know I have all the documentation, but I need to pull it out of my file and give it to the editor to put it all together.
okay.
And I feel
Um,
much more comfortable if we had overnight.
So what I would suggest is that we do that and then we vote it out first thing tomorrow and send it to House General so that they can, and everybody else, so that they can look at it and even begin their deliberations on whether they're going to agree or ask for conference committee or whatever.
Okay.
So that even before we pass it out of the Senate, and then I would ask that we do the same thing and ask for it to be put in all stages of passage so that we can get it over to them. And I also, at this point, would like to ask if Senator Collmore would report this.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be glad to. Well, Michael, if you can get the
Yes, Senator.
absolute final version, we could actually post it today.
That was my point, why I was making that, if you wanted a work version for yourselves, obviously I could turn that around very quickly. But in terms of a clean, final edited version,
All right.
I've already pushed editing, I think, for one day to its limit in terms of making changes with other things going on.
Yeah,
I'd rather not push editing any further for this afternoon if I possibly could not.
Okay,
If it had the night, it would definitely be appreciated in the edit by the editors.
all right, that's fine.
we have to be very careful about pushing our staff. So I appreciate that.
It's not a matter of my simply writing it and getting it down there. They have to go over it with a fine tooth comb one more time, the
Yep.
new language.
Understood.
And I've already asked them for quite a lot this afternoon.
Okay, so are we set with that?
So
Yeah.
what time tomorrow, Madam Chair, would you be meeting on this?
1 o'clock.
Try to get this to you no later than noon. How's that?
Sounds perfect. And, okay, I think that's, I am gonna ask, the Rules Committee to release one more charter change. It's a relatively simple charter change, allowing the Water District of Wilmington to merge with the town of Wilmington. And they would like to be able to do it now,
You know,
instead of waiting for a year.
I noticed there were a couple others. Burlington had one, Springfield had one, but they never came across.
Thanks, Susan. Yeah, I think the only two that are in rules right now are Wilmington and Brattleboro, and we're not gonna have time to
Right.
look at Brattleboro this year. Just,
Okay. But I did go back through the House Gov Ops stuff.
yeah,
There was a Springfield charter change, a Burlington charter change. They must just not ever taken them up.
well, what I'll do is ask for a Rules Committee meeting right after the floor tomorrow. And if there are any other, if they've sent over any other charters, we
Okay.
can ask for them. And then tomorrow, after, when we're finished with this, we'll just look at those charters. Does
Yep.
that make sense?
Yep.
So that we can just get them off our plate. So we should be pretty good for next week. And I don't know if we want to, we don't have, I would like us, if you all have the stamina to continue. There's two issues that I know they're not going to be finished this year at all, but there are two issues that I want to keep us kind of moving on. And I don't know if, one is the Agency of Public Safety. I don't know where we are with that. And the other is the Code of Ethics.
Yes, we had to drop those quickly to deal with pensions, so we,
Yeah, and
it would be
And so I
great.
don't know if
back
you
up.
have the stamina to start to maybe take up the, I'm trying to work with the commissioner and a bunch of other people around the, around the Agency of Public Safety, because it's clearly not going to happen this year anyway. And just kind of try and get it into a good, good position so that we can act quickly in January, one way or the other. But the Code of Ethics, do we have the stamina to
Yeah.
start to take that up next Tuesday?
As Gail had a thought, though, maybe.
Okay,
that
Gail.
influenced-
Oh, it's not necessarily a thought. I was just wondering about 122. Isn't that still out there?
What is 120?
What's
I
that?
think it's boards and commissions, right?
Oh, right, we still have to conclude our work on,
Oh, yeah, H122 or whatever.
Oh, yeah. What did we,
we never finished it, I
That
don't.
was the Board of Education thing.
no, we
No?
dropped that because
What was that?
education never got back to us, and then they said they were going to deal with it in another way, but it was the Climate Council.
Oh, that's right, the per diems.
Okay, so
I thought
let's,
we decided to just leave them alone.
Weren't there other things in that bill?
that we did?
Yeah, that your boards and commissions, wasn't there more in that bill, I thought?
Well, there's
I thought
more
there
in the
was
bill,
too.
Yeah,
but not that we did.
right.
I think the only thing we were gonna do was do the thing with the State Board of Education.
And Senate Ed didn't want to do anything?
They said that they were gonna have a different way of dealing with it, so. And then there was the climate change per diems.
Which we haven't resolved.
Okay, so we should do that tomorrow and get that out of the way. And
So
I,
what order are we going to tackle these in?
let's do the resolution first.
Okay,
Oh, no, it might give Michael a little more time.
You know, Jeanette, the board bill also included that emergency management stuff. That was the other thing.
Oh, right, right.
Wellness, the wellness, yeah.
Emergency management districts or whatever they're called.
Oh, I
Erica-
completely forgot that. Yeah,
Erica Bornman's part.
that seemed so non-controversial to me that I didn't even,
I know. It's hard to get worked up over it.
yeah. Okay, let's do 122 first. And then any charters? And then the resolution.
Madam Chair.
Yeah.
When we are done or sort of resolved as much as we can other things, does it make sense for us to be briefed in any way on the State House kind of reopening plan? Or I don't know if that, because I know before you had thought about what some kind of commission, so I just didn't know if that relates to us at all.
Well, you know, I sent them the suggestion to appropriations. And she said that the Joint Management Legislative Committee or whoever they are, I don't know who's on there,
The Joint
Is-
Legislative Management Committee.
and I don't know who that is, but that
That
they're
is for
they're
the
doing
Senate.
it.
For the Senate, it's Becca, Dick Mazza, Jane Kitchell, and Joe Benning.
Okay. So there's 4 and 4, is that what it is?
Yep.
And that they are actually doing it. So it's the same, it's exactly the same that I was proposing, except they already have it set up. But we should, and I have no idea where they are. I know that the pro tem said that
She briefed us a little bit on it.
I think that was at a chairs meeting.
Yeah, or in caucus, in the Tuesday caucus.
Oh, yeah, I don't, oh, yes, because she said, look at that study, but that study is not the final word. It's just some suggestions. And people were getting exercised.
We got
About-
emailed that study this afternoon too.
Oh, we did? Did Carolyn send it to us?
Gail has,
yeah, as far as tomorrow goes, Amarin's not available until 1:30. And then she's unavailable after 2:30. And Tucker is not available at 1:30. His only availability is from, let's see. This thing's so hard to read. It's like 1:30 to 2.
he's available from 1:30 to 2.
Yeah, let me open this up. It's too hard to tell in this chart. Okay, he's in Senate Finance until 1:45. And then he is doing something else at 2:15. So 1:45 to 2:15.
That'll work.
And Ameren is available from 1:30 to when?
From 1:30 to 2:30.
No, no, that's not gonna work.
Okay, it's 1:15 to 2:30.
That she's available
Yeah,
or that she's not available? Oh, she is available.
yeah.
So
So-
let's, at 1:15,
Okay,
let's do H 122, because that's when we need her, right?
yep.
Yep.
And then at 1:45, that'll give us half an hour on that. At 1:45, let's do Underhill. At 2 o'clock, Williston. And at 2:15, oh no, he's leaving us at 2:15?
Yes.
Okay, so we'll do Underhill and Williston. And we don't have Wilmington yet anyway, so we'll do those two. And then at 2:15, we'll do the resolution.
Okay, so 15 minutes is enough for 2 charters?
Yeah.
No, I have 1:45 to 2
Oh,
Underhill and 2 to 2:15.
so if we start at 1:45, that only gives us half an hour to talk about 122. Is that enough time?
No, we're gonna do, oh yeah, if we do from 1:15 to 1:45,
Okay,
we'll do H122. That gives us half an hour on that. That should be enough, right?
Yeah.
And then at 1:45, we'll do Underhill. And
okay,
at 2 o'clock, we'll do Williston.
okay.
And then Tucker will leave us and Michael will join us and we'll do the resolution. And then next week, we can schedule some time. I did get a note from Larry Nobens and we'll schedule some time for to continue our conversation about the ethics, the code of ethics. And I know we're not going to get it done, but I'd like us to not completely drop it this year, if there's any possibility of us doing something next week.
Yeah, and we've pushed him out the door twice, so I agree. I think that would be a good signal to him that we still are interested.
And for what it's worth, we passed out of committee a bill that changed some technical changes around the Ethics Commission, which I think got sent to the Finance Committee.
No, I
Yes.
think it got sent to appropriations.
Well, it got
because there
sent
was a
somewhere.
halftime. So
No.
we should,
There was no appropriation needed though, because they already had the money. We just
but they have
authorized
to
them to.
approve the position.
Right.
So I'll send Jane a note right now. That was 135, I think.
I'll double check for you.
And Gail, if you want to, you can ask if the reporters from Underhill and Williston want to come in.
Okay,
And if they do, that's fine. And if they don't,
all right.
I think it was 135, wasn't it, Brian?
It's H135 and it was referred to finance
Oh,
on April 14th for Rule 31. And there's no action after that.
why would it have gone to finance?
I don't know, but that's what the.
Okay, I will check with them to find out where it is.
It's actually, I had a conversation with Amarin a little while ago. And she said that, I said, why is it in finance? And Amarin said, I don't know. She said she got a call from the staff person in finance who asked Amarin why it got sent to finance. And Amarin said, I don't know why it got sent to finance. So
It may be, God forbid, have been a mistake.
I'm trying to remember if there was anything relative to finance in there. I don't remember without seeing it in front of me.
I don't think so.
You think Ann would have said, why is this here? And I mean, it's almost a month ago.
I don't think she's had time to probably look at them all.
Okay.
Okay, I'm
Right.
going to send a note to Anne and Jane and Bloomer and Becca and ask them to clear this up and get it to us so we can get it passed. Okay,
Sure, because mostly it has to do with like doing disclosure statements and stuff like that. It was not very controversial at all.
right. Okay,
All right, committee, I'm going to end the live YouTube.